2 hours.
Try B86543 Moscow.
Yes, sir.
You would never have found him through his office, Mr. President. Our premier is a man of the people, but he is also a man, if you follow my meaning.
Degenerate atheist.
What did you say?
I said Premier Kissov is a degenerate atheist.
Mr. President, I formally request that you have this ignorant brute.
I'm sorry,
Mr. President, I think they're trying the number.
You filthy bully, you filthy bully. You guy, you not tasting it out even more, eh? You war mustang bully.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
You can't fight in here. This is the war room. One of the funniest lines from one of the funniest and most deeply satirical movies ever made, Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. This particular scene, probably the most famous scene in the movie, occurs when a group of politicians and diplomats from the United States and the Soviet Union learns that an American plane has lost control with Central Command and is on its way to drop a nuclear bomb on Moscow. The world is about to blow up, and people need to act quickly. But small, petty disputes get in the way of effectively resolving a huge problem. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about working in groups, working in teams, and specifically the reasons that teams don't work and what can make them work better. The bulk of this podcast will be taken not from your textbook, but from this book, Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, a book of management theory that's become very popular for talking about groups in all sorts of industries. Lencioni is a very well-known management consultant and best-selling author, and in the following clip, he'll describe this book himself and what exactly constitute the 5 principal dysfunctions of any executive or management or working group or team.
Patrick Lencioni, author of several business book classics, joins us to discuss his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Can you summarize for us the 5 dysfunctions of a team?
So the first dysfunction of a team is the absence of trust. That's when team members are not comfortable being vulnerable and open and honest with one another. The next dysfunction of a team, if there is no trust, is the fear of conflict. Because people on a team should be comfortable engaging in good, healthy conflict around ideas. When there's no conflict, then we get to the next one, which is the lack of commitment. When people won't commit to a decision because they haven't weighed in on a topic, they don't buy into that topic. Conflict enables people to commit to something. When there's not commitment, we're led to the fourth dysfunction of a team, which is the unwillingness to hold one another accountable. Great team members hold each other accountable. It's a peer-to-peer kind of thing. Because they've committed to the decision, because they had conflict and they trust each other, of course they'll enter the danger and hold each other accountable for what's necessary for the team. And then if there's not accountability, then we have the fifth dysfunction of a team, which is the inattention to results. And what that is, it's when team members aren't focusing on the collective results of the team, they're focusing on their own ego or their own budget or their own department or their career.
Who is this book written for?
I specifically target it to executives in a company, but it's not limited to them. Luckily, and I'm glad to know that people from churches and sports teams and the military and nonprofit and schools are using it as well. So it's very broadly based, but it was written about an executive team because that's how I started my company, working with CEOs and their teams.
Backstabbing and office politics can really cripple a company's operations. How can a leader curtail or stop this kind of interaction?
Well, the first thing they need to do is build trust on a team, because politics is a very natural result when there's a lack of trust, because then people are trying to organize what they say in a way that manipulates the audience, or that trying to win rather than really solve the problem. But the other thing a leader has to do is call it out. There's nothing more powerful than when you see someone say something that sounds like it's passive-aggressive or political to say, you know, that sounded pretty passive-aggressive or political. You take the oxygen out of the room and you make it so it's very difficult for someone to continue to do that.
Once we know what the 5 dysfunctions of a team are, we know the 5 things that make groups work well. Group work works when the group has trust, when there are strategies for managing and structuring conflict, when the members of the group have commitment, when group members hold each other accountable, and when the group itself is paying most of its attention to the results and not to individual goals or political objectives. let's talk about each one of these in turn. We're used to talking about trust to mean something like reliability or truthfulness or honesty. You trust somebody if you can give them an assignment and you know that they'll do it. But that's not quite what Lencioni means when he says teams need to trust each other. What he means is that personally, the members of teams need to trust that they can be vulnerable with each other without getting pounced on, without being severely criticized. They need to feel that a group meeting is a safe place not to be perfect. So when he talks about a team building trust, he means that team members of a trusting team are able to admit their weaknesses and their mistakes without worrying that other people will use those against them, that they're willing to ask each other for help, that they will always give each other the benefit of the doubt, and that they will focus their time and energy on constructive discourse and not on politics. And politics is another term that he has a very special definition for. Politics, and I quote directly from his book here, politics is when people choose their words and answers based on how they want others to react rather than based on what they really think. People who are members of a trusting group are really free. They feel free to say what they think, not what they think other people want to hear or what they think will produce the reactions that they want. They will offer and accept apologies when they do something wrong, perhaps sometimes even when they don't, but when apologizing is the right thing to do. And they enjoy going to meetings, both because they're enjoyable, but also because they're productive, because they enjoy getting things done. Here's an area where I don't quite agree with the authors of your textbook, who talk about the value of minimizing and reducing conflicts within a group. I think that conflict is a good thing, and that when intelligent, articulate people who care about something get together, that conflict actually produces good results. It produces more knowledge, more information, and more accountability. And that rather than trying to minimize conflict, we should set some ground rules to structure conflict. And all of the ground rules really amount to one thing, and that is that we have to learn how to have conflicts about ideas without feeling personally attacked. Once we do that, and that's a matter of trust, once we develop the trust that allows us to understand that disagreeing about ideas does not mean that we don't value a person or care about a person or respect a person, then we can have productive conflict within a group. And that leads to things like lively and interesting meetings. It leads to an environment in which people can express themselves and in which all of the important ideas can come out. That's how problems get solved. And it also minimizes the politics of the situation. It minimizes people's concern about their own agendas because they're completely free to express their ideas about the group problems. And finally, when we have conflicts, unless we really do agree, which is rarely, when intelligent people are going to agree entirely, if we feel free to air these disagreements, we will probably spend most of our time talking about what is really important rather than getting around what's really important because it produces conflict and talking about trivial things instead. Commitment means the willingness of the group to make a decision and to implement that decision and to move forward. The two principal enemies of commitment are consensus, or the need to make sure that everybody completely agrees with everything, and certainty, or the need to be absolutely certain that this is the right thing to do. The fact is that consensus and certainty are virtually impossible in any rational decision-making process, and insisting on them is just a way to hold things up. And group members usually will insist on greater consensus or greater certainty when what they really want to do is stall and make sure that things don't happen. But the fact is that decisions have to be made, and any decision is usually better than doing absolutely nothing. So a team that has committed, and a team that values commitment, will have a clarity of purpose. They will agree on what they want to accomplish, which isn't the same thing as agreeing on how they're going to get there. But they will align around common objectives, and they will occasionally make mistakes. Being decisive means occasionally making mistakes and learning from those mistakes and moving forward without hesitation when you've made a decision, and being willing to change direction when it becomes necessary to do so because you made the wrong decision. And you'll see that all these characteristics of good teams build on each other. When there is trust, then there is a discussion and argument, and people feel that they've been heard, and they feel that the process has been followed. So there is the buy-in that's necessary to create commitment. And once you do this, then you can move forward in directions, and because you've eliminated the environment where people's egos are entirely at stake, then if you go in the wrong direction, you don't feel that you're stuck going in that direction because people's egos are on the line. Members of a functional team hold each other accountable for their performance. Not in a top-down way with the boss holding everybody else accountable or in a hierarchical way, but in a much more open and democratic way. Once everybody has bought into a decision and has bought into a set of common goals, then everybody in that team should feel empowered to apply peer pressure, should feel empowered to bring every other member of that team to accountability. Peer pressure, as it is in third grade and almost every other human industry afterwards, is one of the most important and substantial motivators of action. And if the members of the team feel comfortable with each other and feel that they are peers, they should also feel that they are responsible for putting pressure, for holding each other accountable for those goals and for the objectives that they have identified. What is important here is that people identify problems quickly. When problem areas come up in a functional team, they're immediately identified, and it doesn't matter who does it. This should always proceed from an environment where people respect each other, where they treat each other as professionals, where they understand that everybody is competent, intelligent, and wants to be held accountable because everybody has an interest in the team's success. And it means that this should happen informally, with people in the boardroom or in the hallways talking to each other, rather than through an excessive bureaucracy built around performance management. It's possible to have a very formalized set of procedures for accountability that doesn't get anything done because it removes the peer pressure from the group and turns it into an institutional pressure, which is much easier to deflect. So it is through informal relationships rather than bureaucratic mechanisms that the accountability within groups is going to be best assured. And here's the payoff. In a dysfunctional team, people are focused on turf. They're focused on their area of responsibility and making sure that their posterior ends are sufficiently covered. In the functional team, every member of the team sees the big picture and understands that success is the success of the enterprise, not the success of an individual area. So the functional, highly operational team minimizes individualistic behavior and focuses on winning the game. This is how any athletic team needs to work. A group of very, very fine athletes not playing as a team will probably not win games. It's the same way in groups. Most of the distractions that teams get distracted by have to do with what's important to one member, not what's important to the whole group. Once you've identified the direction that the group is moving in, once you've identified how the team is going to play, then the question that every member of that group needs to ask is, how do I best support the big picture, not how do I accomplish what I want to accomplish for my particular area of responsibility. Functional teams get things done.